which is really first class, is the gentleman you're going to hear from now, Dr. Paul Clayton. Just to give you some of his accolades, he graduated summa cum laude in medical pharmacology from Edinburgh University prior to obtaining his PhD. He's the former chair of the the Forum on Food and Health in the United Kingdom, senior scientific advisor to the United Kingdom's Government Committee on the Safety of Medicines. He was a fellow of the Institute of Food, Brain, and Behavior at Oxford. He works with leading doctors and clinical scientists at centers of clinical expertise in many countries, designing and supervising preclinical and clinical trials of pharmaconutritional interventions. In fact, Dr. Clayton's books and ebooks include Health Defense, After Atkins, Natural Defenses, Out of the Fire, Let Your Food Be Your Pharmaconutrition, and Strengthening Your Immune System, How to Fight Infection, Allergy, and Autoimmune Disease. Now, if any of that sounds interesting to you, then wait till you hear from Dr. Paul Clayton. I have to say that we've actually become friends. We have traveled together. We spent 4 hours in a train together in Italy, going between countries. Stacy and I just fell in love with him. And Stacy, just every time we get a chance to be with him, can't wait. We end up having so many great conversations. We've had some great food together in Italy and also in Spain. And today he's in Florida at his home there. He travels all over the world. He's the most requested guest speaker in all of Zinzino, and he's taking time out of his Saturday afternoon to join us on this call. And Dr. Paul, how are you today?
Well, I'm here because you twisted my arm, Art. I'm good. I'm good.
Well, I hope to twist your arm and get you up to New Hampshire to visit with us sometime soon on Lake Winnipesaukee, where it's absolutely a gorgeous day. But I've been looking forward to this chance to speak with you, with our team watching and many guests also listening in. But I have to first start out by just saying how proud we are that you're representing Zinzino. I mean, I've read even more into your resume, and I was blown away to learn you've had over 200 published studies in professional medical journals, peer-reviewed journals, and that is just a remarkable number of studies to have out there. So my first question would be, how long have you been with Zinzino, and what attracted you to be part of a direct selling company like Zinzino?
Well, I've been with Zinzino for a little over a decade now. And it's, for a long time, I've been working in a more academic kind of a way, a more theoretical way, if you wish. And it got to the point where, talking to my colleagues, we began to realize that there was a lot of theory now that we could turn into practice. And at a certain point, it became a moral imperative. We couldn't just stay in the collegiate atmosphere. We had to take this information and go to the public and say, look, here are some tools that you can use to improve your health. Zinzino gave me the opportunity to do that. I was advising a very small company which had developed Balance Oil, which in itself was the development of 2 decades worth of research. It goes all the way back to 2002. So Zinzino came along, bought up this company, and came to talk to me. And they said, well, what would you like to do? Do you want to do some work with us? And I thought this would be an opportunity to start to change public health, which I couldn't do if I was solely working as an academic. So I told them I thought that if you are willing to work with me, I can turn you into a life science company. And they took a chance on me, I guess, and they think they now employ me. Now, the reality is I'm employing them. They're my soapbox. I'm using Zinzino to try and effect a positive change in the world. I think we all have a duty to do that. I certainly want to improve our public health, which at this moment in history is at a nadir. It's at a low point. Zinzino was a shop window, an opportunity to develop a series of tools that people could use to step out of ill health and to regain their full biological potential. That's the point.
Well, when you see articles coming out today, like a white paper was submitted to the White House in March, sounding the alarm on the dangerous imbalance of omega-6 to omega-3. You had National Geographic do an entire issue last year dedicated to anti-inflammation. How big a problem really is this? Even the World Health Organization says 6.3 billion people are out of balance today or deficient in omega-3. And how are we solving that problem?
It is a global problem. And the quants who do these things, do these studies, have measured the amount of fish that are in the world's oceans. And they worked out there aren't enough fish to produce all the omega-3s that the entire population needs in order to achieve a state of health where inflammation is being taken out of the frame, where you can actually be healthy. So on the one hand, we know we need more omega-3s, and there's an awful lot of science that says if you eat more oily fish, you are going to have less inflammation and you will enjoy better health. And this is what gave rise to the omega-3 supplement market. But I have to tell you, Art, it's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. It's a complete blind alley. Because even although we know eating oily fish is associated quite strongly with better health, all the clinical trials that have been done with fish oil have been pretty much a washout. They don't work. And, this was something that had been occupying my mind for quite some time. How could you have such a disconnect? And at a certain point in 2015, I thought I need to write a scientific paper about this. And I published the first paper, which explored the reasons for this disconnect. And what we began to realize subsequently was that it isn't just the omega-3s in oily fish that make you healthy. It's the combination of omega-3s and the chaperones that nature provides to safeguard those omega-3s. It's the combination of these two things that is what is so effective. So what we did at Zinzino is to reconstitute this binary system. And what that means is we're not really omega-3s. We're not really selling fish oil, not in the conventional sense at all. What we're selling, what we're promoting, is a way of switching off chronic inflammation in the body, which recapitulates the health benefits that you will get from eating oily fish. And not everybody wants to eat oily fish. I'm happy with salmon or trout or Manhattan, whatever. But a lot of people don't like that. And some people are concerned, and with good reason, about contamination. We throw a lot of junk into the ocean, PCBs, and organochlorine and organophosphorus derivatives, mercury derivatives. There's a lot of bad stuff in the oceans. And there are some of the world's oceans and seas where you really should not be eating fish regularly at all. The Baltic is one of those seas, and some of the Swedish lakes. So what we have opted to do is to work with a fish oil derived from small pelagic fish, where there is less bioaccumulation, less toxic compounds, from a very clean part of the world, deep in the southern hemisphere. And then we put that through rigorous screening and safety and filtration tests. And then we add to that the other half of this binary weapon, which are the polyphenols. And we can talk about more of that if you like. We now have an approach which is available to anybody. We can produce it in unlimited amounts because we can now grow it from algae. And it is extraordinarily effective at switching off chronic inflammation. It's effective as a pharmaceutical.
Well, Dr. Clayton, from a personal standpoint, and we've spoken about my own health journey. And 4 years ago, in fact, this summer, I survived a heart attack, and we had 98% blockage in the descending left artery. And in fact, I had 2 stents put in. I was very fortunate to survive that. And I was speaking with my dear friend, one of the members of your team, Stephen Chiniski, a well-known biochemist, and also Dr. Natalie, and they said, whatever the doctors are getting you on, you need to take omega-3. And he said, you should probably read about it. Go and Google the importance of omega-6 or omega-3. So I'm the average guy that's watching this meeting today. I'm not a science guy. Wasn't particularly focused on supplements, but I read when I Googled it, the importance of this ratio in getting the number down to 3 to 1 or better. And when I first took the test, even with 3 years years taking a high quality omega-3, I was still 12-1, but after 4 months in the balance oil, I was down to 3.3, and now I'm down to 2.2-1 after I've been taking the product for over a year. So here's what happened to me. I got angry at the medical community. I go to the doctors, I pay for the best medicine I can pay in the United States. I get my blood work done. They test my cholesterol, my HDL, LDL, triglycerides, blood pressure. But why aren't they testing for this? And when is this test and this idea going to be mainstream? Because as we've said, Stuart Tomp, who came over from Nordic Naturals as their chief global science officer, he not their science officer, but he was their global spokesman and educator. He said to me, Artie, this is really one of the most important numbers we don't know about our health. But why aren't doctors testing us now? And do you see in the future that will be the case?
Well, that obviously is going to change. But I think we have a systemic problem with the medical profession. They don't take nutrition very seriously. I mean, I went through medical studies at Edinburgh University, which was at that time the best medical school in Britain. I went through 3 different degrees. I just liked to be at university studying. And in those 11 or 12 years that I spent there were 3 hours of nutritional biochemistry, and that's it. Doctors tend to focus on pharmaceuticals, and there are all kinds of reasons for that. Historical reasons, philosophical reasons, and I have to say, financial reasons also. But we also have a regulatory problem. If we have regulatory systems now, you have the FDA in the United States, EFSA in Europe, the TGA in Australia and elsewhere, and they have reached a consensus, which is very influenced by the pharmaceutical industry, that says you can only make claims about treating illness if you have a pharmaceutical license. Now, that was a regulatory system that sort of worked 50 years ago, but like the Maginot Line, it's totally out of date because we now have pharmaconutritional approaches to health, which are as effective as anything that the pharmaceutical industry has yet produced, yet we cannot talk about it. So this is a difficult environment for you and me and other people like us to work in. Why don't doctors go there? I think that those doctors who have studied nutritional biochemistry are starting to get it. And as you know, we're now working with doctors and medical specialists of all kinds in over 140 countries. I think what they were waiting for were numbers. Doctors love numbers. They love tests. You want to base your therapeutic strategies on objectifiable, mutually agreed facts. If you're talking about using fish oil, well, the fish oil industry produces vast amounts of supplements. People consume vast amounts of supplements. But how do you know if they're doing you any good? Well, spoiler alert, they don't, because they're so poorly formulated. So you have this situation where you have a pharmaceutical industry which causes enormous amounts of destruction. We have no cures for any of the diseases apart from the antibiotics, which cure infectious diseases. We have no cures for any of the chronic degenerative diseases. All we have are drugs that manage symptoms, while the disease generally tends to progress. And right now, if you step back from the detail, you can see that our public health is in massive, substantial decline. I can give you a list of over 80 different conditions, serious conditions, the ones that matter, all of which are becoming more frequent and occurring in younger and younger populations. And the reason is, with all the drugs in the world, they won't undo the damage that our increasingly unhealthy lifestyle is driving us towards. So we need numbers. We need to know where you are. When you come to see us, are you already eating a healthy diet? If you have, and you get a great test result, we'll say, you're doing really well. You don't need us. Oh, and by the way, here's your money back. I think that's the ethically correct position. If you have a negative result, you can see that. You can show it to your doctor, and even the most boneheaded doctor can have a look at that and say, okay, well, I can cross-reference this against the literature, and I can see there is an issue here. Then you can go away. You can go and eat salmon 6 times a week, or you can drink a couple of tablespoonfuls of balance oil every day, come back in 100, 120 days, and you can see for yourself, and your doctor can see, that your 6-to-3 ratio has dropped from 15, 25, 45 to 1, which drives inflammation, down to below 5, which stops inflammation. So now we have a metric that you can see, that you can understand, that you can share. And by the way, it's not just a 3:6 ratio. We also have to take into account the 3 index. And for anyone who's interested, I write about these sorts of things on my blog.
Well, Dr. Clayton, when I was at my doctor's appointment here in the US not too long ago, he says, "So where are you going, Art? Are you traveling all over the world?" I said, "Yeah, I have a new business." I was telling him about Zinzino. And I said, "Why didn't you ever test me for this omega balance?" He says, "Yeah, we like to keep people under 5." I said, "Well, you never tested me for it, and I've had all these health issues." And I showed him a screenshot of the PubMed study that showed if you get down, to 3 to 1, the health benefits, including, there was an association, it said, quote unquote, with a 70% decrease in the risk of mortality from cardiovascular disease. Not my words, not a claim, but what it said there. He goes, "Can I take a picture of that and you send me the link?" So I thought that a little bit funny. So look, we've had private conversations, and there's a couple things I want to bring up for everybody here. When we were talking, we were in Italy going, one time we were on a 4-hour train ride, and Stacy and I were visiting with you. You talked about gut health with us, and we asked you about Zinzino biotic. Now, of course, we got the protocol, which we always say, let's get the cells right, get the healthy membrane around the cell, get in balance. And then you said something I never heard anybody say. You said, in truth, this product, Zinzino biotic, is as important and maybe even more important for people, and that they really complement each other. So when we talk about what Larry was saying earlier, system of take supplementation that complement and work together, can you kind of talk to us a little bit about Zinzino biotic? I guess the first question really is, what does this term leaky gut mean? I hear people talking leaky gut. I'm a layperson. What is leaky gut?
Okay. Well, drugs are very often used on their own, but nutrients don't work that way. Nutrients network, and they operate much more effectively in the body when they're used correctly, and that almost always means in the right combinations. Now, the modern diet and lifestyle gives you a terrible 6:3 ratio and a terrible 3 index, so you have chronic inflammation, and we see that in the public health figures. But the modern diet and lifestyle damages you in other ways as well. One of the ways in which it does that is it creates dysbiosis, which means you have absolutely the wrong populations of microorganisms in the large intestine and actually in every other tissue of the body. People are familiar with the concept of the microbiota that lives in the large intestine, but no part of you is sterile. And I'm not getting at you individually, Art. Don't take that as a personal criticism. But every single part of your body, your heart, your bloodstream, your brain, is populated in health by a certain set of species of microbes, and in disease by a different set. And the changing population, the abnormal population of microbes in the gut, which is directly caused by the modern diet, leads to population shift in the gut, which causes gut problems and liver problems and cardiovascular problems and brain problems. But it also leads to disturbances in the microbial populations of every other part of your body. So what I decided to do was to create a nutritional formulation that mimicked the diet of vestigial cultures. That is, people who still live as if the last few centuries hadn't happened. They're still eating foods which they could farm or forage or fish or hunt. No ultra-processed foods at all. That's historically a recent phenomenon. If you're eating that kind of more natural diet, which was the diet that our bodies have co-evolved, adapted to live on, then that means, amongst other things, increasing your intake of prebiotic fiber. And I know a lot of people have heard of that now. And these prebiotic fibers are a kind of carbohydrate, but you don't digest it. It doesn't add to blood sugar. It passes through intact into the large intestine, and there it acts as a fuel for the probiotic species that already live inside you. So this is a supplement that is designed to rectify your microbiota and restore what we call eubiosis. Now, why is that important? A lot of work is done on analyzing the different microbial communities inside you. And a lot of it is very shoddy. And I think a lot of it is pretty meaningless because it's such a dynamic situation. It changes from hour to hour, probably from minute to minute, depending on every meal you've eaten, every mood state you're experiencing. We're now moving away from these very complicated differential analyses of all the different microbial species in your gut. Now we're looking at something much simpler, which is known as colonic epithelial barrier function. Now, all these microbes in the gut are pumping out thousands of different metabolites. Some of these are useful to you, but many of them are not. So the gut has evolved in such a way that it has a barrier which prevents the movement of these potentially dangerous microbes and their potentially harmful metabolites into you. They're kept in the gut. However, take the prebiotics out of your diet. The good guys die off. They're replaced by really unhealthy microbes, which have the ability to break down this barrier. At that point, the cells that line the gut start to open up, and it really does become leaky. So now exotoxins are leaching into your bloodstream, which is one of the reasons so many people have liver damage now, and microbes are getting into the bloodstream as well. And this is contributing to liver disease, heart disease, brain disease, and autoimmune disease. By adding the prebiotics back into the diet, you restore a healthy population, the barrier function starts to heal, the gut starts to heal. Now the toxins that are being formed in the gut are kept there. They're not affecting you any longer. That's the point.
Now, what Stuart said to me, and he said you could comment on this, that the xenobiotic really helps the balance oil to be more effective. And we have a lot of customers that just think they should only be taking balance oil. And I think our conversation on the train, you said this probably is even more important and certainly needs to be as equal in terms of how people view Zinzino, starting with these two as the first two pieces of the health protocol. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say so. And I mean, I don't claim this is a groundbreaking invention. Hippocrates got there first, right? He said all disease starts in the gut. And I gotta say, the big fellow is pretty much on target. I won't say that everything starts in the gut, but it's really important to have the right microbiota population. We've drifted very, very far astray. Now look, the modern diet causes this problem with omega-3s, put that right, but it's also causing this very substantial problem in the intestines. You have to put that right too. And when you are taking these two formulations together, you're providing antidotes to two of the most important ways in which the modern diet and lifestyle are making us so sick.
Well, you did say you were very proud of this product. We take it every day, both Stacy and I. And that's the first two pillars of our health protocol. But we're coming out, it's well known now, we're talking about a gut health test. With everything going right, possibly even this fall at our convention in Oslo, people are talking about it. We had Orion as a guest speaker just a week or two ago who spoke about this. Can you talk to us a little bit about, he said something like 8 years of R&D on this, and that's remarkable. And, is this test really breakthrough science?
Yes, it is. I mean, the balance test is something that we inherited. It was developed by very good scientists at the universities of Rome and Trondheim and elsewhere. And that tells us all about balance and inflammation. All of that is great. But let's think about probiotics and prebiotics. There's an industry selling huge amounts of probiotics and yogurts and capsules. How do we know that they work? We don't. And in fact, none of them work particularly well either, because every time we put them into studies, you don't get particularly good results. That's why EFSA hasn't yet allowed a single claim to be associated with any of the probiotics. So once again, if we're going to convince the medical profession that there is something important going on here, we need numbers. We need simple tests, dried blood spot tests, for example, that can be done at home, which have a database behind them, which is strong enough to allow the medical profession to understand these numbers are meaningful. So whereas the balance test is something that we identified as useful and brought on board, the gut test is something that we have been developing internally. We're getting very close to it now. We're going to be rolling it out, I think, in Oslo. It's again looking and focusing on gut barrier epithelial function and the way this affects the metabolism of certain amino acids, whether they are going down a positive route, leading it to metabolites which are associated with really good health, or whether they're going down a negative route and turning into metabolites which we know are bad for us. So that tells us a great deal about what's happening in the gut. And it's more meaningful than any of the stool analysis systems that people are
What?
currently wasting their money on. This will be all ours. We developed it in-house. Once it's been turned into a commercially useful and available tool, I predict that every doctor worth his or her salt will be wanting to incorporate this into their own practice.
That's a huge statement. One of the big reasons Larry and I came to Zinzino, and Stephen and Natalie, who were helping me evaluate several companies' portfolios, was really you and the science of Zinzino and the testing that was here. And knowing that we're pushing the envelope here with science and a dry blood spot test for gut health, this sounds like big news to me from a business standpoint, not just a health standpoint, to be able to offer a test that we know can help to show the need for a product like Zinzino Biotic. And I imagine it would be like the balance test. Will we be testing before to show you need it? And then after they take this product, will we be able to show results?
Absolutely. And you won't have to wait for 120 days. When you start eating prebiotic fibers, the probiotics that live inside you say, thank you very much. And they start doubling up, and they double really fast, 2 or 3 times in 24 hours. What that means is that within a week, you can see that all the needles have shifted from red back to green.
Within a week. Wow, that's really helpful from a marketing standpoint, because when someone has to wait 120 days to see
Yeah.
a result, they can lose focus, they lose interest, and sadly, they lose the benefit of getting into balance. But with gut health, to show a result so quickly and to offer a dry blood spot test, from what I've been told and what I've heard in seminars from you and others, that no one is doing anything like this without having to dip into the toilet. And no one wants to do that, and no one wants to anybody sending that through the mail. That excites me. And we came here because of the science.
You know, I don't really care about the business side of things. What motivates me is the science. And, you know, I need to test, and we need the numbers, and I need to persuade my more skeptical, or what shall I call them, conservative, scientifically illiterate colleagues in the medical profession that this is the way they need to go. Where there is so much dysbiosis, you know, almost half the world now has liver disease as a direct result of dysbiosis. And that goes all the way through from SAMLD to MASH, all the way through to liver cancer. And by the way, the figures for all of these conditions are spiraling. We can't afford to continue going down this road. We don't have enough surgeons to take out all the liver cancers. And even if we could grow them in petri dishes, I mean, it's not possible. This is a road to ruin. We need to get the basics right. We need to get the food table right. And this is a very important part of that process.
Hey, doctor, if you don't mind, Artie, I just want to just pop in real quick. Will it be the xenobiotic, or will it be a new and improved xenobiotic in combination with the test?
Look, everything that we do goes through constant process of improvement. And so balanced soil isn't exactly the same formulation as it was when we started. Xenobiotic has gone through a couple of iterations. It's like software that goes through version 1, 2, 3. Xenobiotic will continue to evolve, I'm sure, as the science base develops. The formulation that is currently being used will show up in that test. Future versions may show up even better.
Well, I was just on a Zoom with Orion Saleh, our co-founder, and he told me Zinzino is continually evolving, like you said. In fact, he had a new version of a balance oil that had 4 patents tied to it in his refrigerator that he was testing. Again, this, I guess, is further proof that we're not going to sit on what we've already done. We have an eye toward the future.
Absolutely. And I think one of the signs that we're doing things right are the number of companies that are now starting to copy us. So we can't rest on our laurels, and we're not going to. We have a pipeline of developments which are going to keep us at the forefront of this field of pharmaconutrition, I would say for the next quarter century. Orion has got these patents on the forms of balance oil he's talking about. I'm working on others, and there's more again. Our portfolio is never going to be large. It's never going to be, like Herbalife, who have this telephone book full of products, most of which actually don't have any effect at all. We're going to keep it simple, we're going to keep it measurable, and we're going to keep it real.
Let's talk about the protocol when you add extend to it, and how important is that in combination with the Zinzino biotic and the balance oil?
Okay, I think of these things as like panels of an umbrella, and you need to have all the panels in place before you're really properly protected. Or you can think of it as a chair, which has a number of legs. If you have a chair with only 2 legs, that's not particularly stable. 3 is better. 4 is going to allow you to sit back and relax. We can stop chronic inflammation with balance oil. We can restore a healthy microbiota population with xenobiotic. The third problem that the modern diet and lifestyle creates is something called type B malnutrition. Now, there's 2 reasons for this. We're physically very inactive. If you go back only a century and a half before the development of information technology, before the internal combustion engine, people did much more physical work than we do now. So in England, in the period 1850 to 1900, and it's a period I've studied and written scientific papers about, men were consuming up to 7,000 calories a day. Women between, let's say, 2.5 and 3.5. And yet they were slim. We know that because we have photographs from that period. What were they eating? They were eating basic produce, which is a high nutrient density and a low calorie density. They weren't eating Snickers bars. They didn't exist. They weren't eating Cheerios or Captain Crunch. They didn't exist. They were eating bread and cheese and fruits and vegetables in season. So they're eating really large amounts of these foods. And this was a diet that was nutrient dense, lots of minerals and vitamins. I know you call them vitamins.
Yes.
And phytonutrients. And when we look at the health of that population, it was extraordinary. They were much, much healthier than we are today. So what happened to us? We're physically less active. We're getting by on maybe only 2,000 kilocalories a day. And what are we eating? Oh my God, look at ultra-processed food. A lot of those calories are empty, sugars and starches and plant oils. And so what that means is we end up very low in vitamins and minerals, the trace elements, phytonutrients, and that is a third major contributory factor to the terrible ill health that we see all around us today. So what Extend does, it takes your typical contemporary micro and phytonutrient profile and raises it to the level that you find in the blue zones. No higher than that. No higher than that. We don't want to go higher because, as Paracelsus taught us, everything is a poison. It's just a question of the dose. You can harm yourself with excessive doses of some of the trace elements and some of the vitamins and phytonutrients. So we go up to the profile that you find in the mid-Victorian period, 1850 to 1900 in Britain, or in the Hadza, the hunter-gatherers who live in Tanzania, or the Tsimane, the forager horticulturalists who live in Bolivia, who have much, much less degenerative disease than we do. So I talked about inflammation, I talked about dysbiosis, 2 major causes of our appalling public health. The third driver is this pattern of type B malnutrition, where you're low in everything. So Extend is the antidote to type B malnutrition. And it's when you put these 3 elements together that you have this complete protection. The Viva is a little bit of an option. It's a little bit of an oddity, but we can talk about that separately if you'd like.
Well, again, I guess you're leading into Viva. We should hear why is Viva important? How is that helping us? I know someone like myself who's always go, go, go. I struggle sometimes getting my brain to rest for even me to sleep. And so is this something that I need to be taking? Well, I do take it.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you that there's nothing new about Viva. It's about 1,000 years old.
Okay.
And the first references to this are by Ibn Sina, who was the Persian polymath. He was a mathematician, an astronomer, a doctor. More people probably know him by his Latin name, which is Avicenna. I mean, really a great scientist, one of my heroes. And in his medical textbooks that he wrote in the 9th and 10th centuries, he talks about using saffron to treat conditions which he gave them different names. When you look at what he was treating, it was clearly anxiety and depression. Fast forward 1,000 years, and now a bunch of doctors in Iran, which is what Persia used to be, are studying these old medical texts, and they say, well, is there something here? And they started doing trials with saffron. And it turns out it's as effective as any pharmaceutical in treating depression and anxiety, but without any adverse effects. No withdrawal symptoms, really no toxicity at all. And by the way, people don't go postal when they take saffron. That's the SSRI thing. So this is a really interesting new development. It's safe, highly effective, and the kicker, and the reason why I did a study on this myself with a very good Australian team of scientists, is it works so fast. Now, if you take something like an SSRI, it takes 2, 3, in some cases 4 weeks to have any kind of an effect. And even when it does, it kind of deadens your emotions. You feel dead inside. This is what a lot of people tell me. It's not really a cure. It's a palliative. If you use saffron, you can see the color coming back into people's eyes, into their skin, into their lives within 120 minutes. It works like aspirin for these types of conditions, and it's working in a totally different way. So this really caught my attention. As I said, I was involved in one of the early studies in this. It was one of many that confirmed just how therapeutically powerful this particular extract is. And we have really the privilege of an exclusivity arrangement with the company that has done more work than any other to produce an extract which is purified, validated, and consistent and medically proven. That's what we do. Can I tell you a little bit of how effective it is? Or
Sure.
Do we have time?
Yes, absolutely.
One of my patients is an elderly lady, sharp as a needle. She used to work on a hill, which is a den of vipers, as I'm sure you know. And she had clinical depression, I think, partly as a result of working in that extremely toxic environment full of sociopaths and psychopaths. And she'd been tried every single antidepressant. They just about made it possible for her to live. And at some point, she heard about what I was doing, approached me and said, look, I heard about what you're doing with saffron. Do you recommend this? And I said, I do. I happen to have some with me. Here, why don't you take a couple of these tablets and, go home and call me later today? And I could see the look of disbelief. She said, yeah, sure. She took the tablets to humor me. Okay. And then 2 hours later, she called me from her home and said, what did you just give me? I said, well, it's a purified extract of saffron. And she said, I have been living in a dark house for 50 years. 30 minutes ago, the doors and the windows opened and the light came in.
Wow.
I've heard so many stories like that subsequently, so many stories, thousands and thousands of them. This is life-changing if you suffer from those types of conditions. If you don't, it's probably not so relevant to you.
Well, based on what you just shared, I understand now how important Viva is to add to the basic health protocol. We call it health protocol premium. In fact, Dr. Natalie Cather says it's her favorite product when taking Viva herself. Has always got stories about it. Just a couple things I want to wrap up with. You've said 2 things that one on a personal note, but you've said publicly, we'd love to have the mission of putting hospitals out of business. And 2, you've said that your legacy, when you look back in your life, and this blew me away because someone with your background, over 200 published studies, that you're continuing to do more research, that you said that your legacy would really, looking back, would be the health protocol. And you've talked about, today you said it was an antidote to the modern diet. So our food choices have got us into this problem. We're providing what has been called an antidote to the modern diet. And why would you say that the health protocol is your legacy with all your accolades?
You know, I wasn't even aware I'd published 200 papers. I've never counted them. I didn't think it was that many.
Sure did.
Okay, it's not like me. Okay, if you did. Look, I love science. I live, breathe, and eat and sleep science. I'm a fifth generation scientist. My parents, grandparents, it just goes on.
Oh,
I couldn't have been anything else. So, yeah, a lot of what I did, I think when I started out, I worked for the big pharmaceutical companies when I first graduated. I worked for the government. And you know, I think I did some so-so work. It was okay, I guess. But my feeling was public health is where the problems are. I didn't want to practice individual medicine. I didn't want to publish private medicine. I wanted to do something about the disaster that I see unraveling within public health today. And I believe that Zinzino gave me the opportunity, a soapbox to stand on, that where I could develop this science and turn it into tools, into products that people could use for themselves. Don't take my word for it. Test yourself. Check the numbers. Use this. See how you feel. Transform your life. I don't want you to wait and carry on living in the same old sinful, self-destructive way, and then come and see me or one of my colleagues with a substantially severe condition later on that we can't cure, that we can only prescribe palliatives for. Do it yourself. Keep yourself healthy. Stay away from my medical colleagues.
well, that's powerful what you just said. In closing, I want to tell you that when we first started with Zinzino, Stacy and I took your books and she read every single book you have. The one I read was Out of the Fire. And I want to give a plug to you because that book was eye-opening for me. It was a good read, even for a layperson. And I really encourage everyone to read Out of the Fire. Also, your other books are just fantastic. I mean, Stacy's read every word of your, she's one of your biggest fans, as you now know and have known. But even in Out of the Fire, we noticed one of the chapters was on active suicides in the military, and you cited the study, and not that we need to go down that road, but you talked about, and it was a study with Professor Joe Hiblin and led by also Dr. Michael Lewis, who has actually become a team member of ours and recently added to your scientific advisory team, along with Dr. Natalie and Stephen, who's also with us, that we brought to Zinzino. So I'm really excited that you added Dr. Michael Lewis. He's a brilliant guy, founder of the Brain Health Research Institute. But when I read your book and got introduced to him by Stuart Tomk, I said, wait a minute. And I looked on your book and I looked at the credits and there was Dr. Michael Lewis's name. So again, thank you for wrapping your arms and bringing them onto your team. And I just want to thank you so much for your leadership. When you were introduced in Oslo last year, I never seen such an applause for anybody. Do you get that kind of applause in the world of science when you walk into the into the classroom?
The responses are mixed. The pharmaceutical industry don't like me very much, and I don't like them. It's mutual. I don't like the food industry because they poison so many of us. I hate the supplement industry because most of what they sell us is junk and doesn't have any effect whatsoever. I loathe politicians and everything they represent. I'm a sad, lonely, and embittered individual, Art, as you know me to be. People who are interested in health and in nutrition, I mean, they like what I say, but I would say that they're still in a minority.
Well, I would try to have an argument with you. I think you got a lot of love coming from the Zinzino world, and for everyone that doesn't know you or get this time to have personal relationship with you, I'm a little sad for them because the things that you've created and what you're going to continue to do with Zinzino to push the envelope is going to affect the lives of literally millions of people as we have a quest to get to one day 100 million customers, this grand idea, that Orion and Hilda have. And the network marketing concept is how we get to those people. This way we help you move the needle on public health. And from Larry and my side and the partners, we're also helping people in a financial reality that they're all facing, because that creates so much stress, and we're giving them an avenue there. I know business isn't the part of it you're focused on, but there is a beautiful relationship between the business side of creating value for people, giving them new ways to earn and give them a reason to get away from the traditional stress of the normal job. And at the same time, we're making a difference in people's lives. So on behalf of all of us, we're just so grateful to you and want to thank you for your time today and for all the work you do for us in Zinzino.
No, thank you, Art. The great scientist, father of science, Isaac Newton, said very famously, "If I see further than others, it's because I stand on the shoulders of giants." I'm not comparing myself to him at all, but I've been very fortunate to have access to the work of many good and great scientists who came before me, and I've had this wonderful opportunity of carrying the torch for a short period. And it's not many of us have that opportunity. It'll be passed on to someone else pretty soon. I'm probably going to go off and study my first love, which is pure math. But for the moment, it's just been such a gift to be able to take these ideas and do so much with them. I'm very grateful to Zinzino for that.
Well, Dr. Paul, I know we'll see each other the latest in Oslo in October. I'm hoping that we can get a U.S. date, that we can plan a seminar later in the year, maybe in the fall when you're back in the States. I know you travel for Zinzino, but again, thank you so much for taking time today. I know some people had some questions and things, but we're really about our time right now. So again, you can... I'm just blown away with everything you shared. Thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.